Good morning, Kansas City. Welcome to another edition of KCPS Homeroom. I'm Chris Odom, your ELA coordinator for secondary schools. Today on ELA Tuesday, we'll be talking about nonfiction and central idea, and we're going to base it around some real stuff here in Kansas City, Missouri. If you're local to this town, you've probably heard about this fountain, and let's just use that as kind of a thought-provoking starter image. Do you know the history of this fountain? Do you know the man for which it was originally named? Have you ever seen any of the events that take place nearby? Do you know the historic foundation of the building of the plaza which sits nearby? All these things are very fascinating. So to start there, nonfiction is often something that young readers decide not to give much of a chance. But what you'll probably discover is that the real stuff, the things that we're really writing about that are currently really happening every day in our city, might even be more fulfilling. So today we're going to apply your study of some very strong writing here, and powerful information that Kevin Fox Gotham is going to be somebody that we're going to feature today, in a book called Race, Real Estate, and Uneven Development. So let's go on and look a little bit about him. And he works at Tulane University as a professor of sociology, which is the study of the interaction of people over time and societies and cultures and how they are built, and often things that we can learn a lot about life by taking a class called sociology. So he's the author of this very important book, Race, Real Estate, and Unequal Development, The Kansas City Experience from 1900 to 2010. And hey, I've lived in Kansas City for now 42 years. So what's fun is to read about this and really find a lot of new information about the place that you've been your whole life. Another book that I'm hanging on to here is also pretty known in this world right now, called Racism in Kansas City, with a foreword by Alvin Brooks and written by C.S. Griffin. So if you're looking for some other really great nonfiction that could spur your study about some of the challenging issues that we meet in this city, those are two really good books, and we're going to look at one of them today. Okay, so today we're really focusing on central idea. You're going to hear me read one page from this very strong and dense language that contains so much information, and immediately we'll notice the transition from what we've been reading on these on these Tuesdays, which has been primarily poetry and narrative text. So we'll really need to listen carefully, as you don't have a copy of this book. And to do so, we're going to really just listen for what we think the central idea might be. So let's go on and define what is a central idea. Okay, a central idea is what the text is mainly about. And it is more than a topic. Sometimes you can explain a topic by just saying a word. But a central idea, you would need to explain a little bit more, because it's more of what we would consider a message. Okay, so if we were thinking about what is the central topic, what is even just the topic of this picture we see here? We see the same fountain featured from earlier, that is the once named J.C. Nichols fountain. And all these people here are representing an interest they have, right? And this has been a known location in our city for protests to occur. So we might even consider why. Why is this fountain so significant that way? And in some ways, why has it been renamed? Okay. If you were thinking about the word also central idea, sometimes people apply that to like I was saying, fiction. But really, when you're in the fiction world, the central idea is more considered the theme. So here's a story called The Fountain. I throw that up there. And you can see in this writing about the fountain, look how it starts out. Tom walked into Nelson Mandela Square past the enormous statue of Madiba. Well, okay, this isn't a story that we would find written in the same way that we would find in this book, because it's written in a narrative style that tells a story, and it is not true, right? So in that case, we're seeing some of the elements of fiction, same content, and we would call the central idea of this a theme. instead of actually using the word central idea. We would save central idea for things that are nonfiction, like we're going to read today. Okay, so I'm going to read you one big page of this text today and kind of give you a chance to absorb it. So in order to do so, I'm going to want you to have something to scribble on, write down with, pen or pencil, paper. Let's think about if you could do a little bit of careful listening and make some notes about what you hear. That way, all those details that you write down, and we'll think about what to put down on your paper here in a minute, might point toward what it all has to do with each other. And then from that conclusion, that might be what you consider the central idea. Okay, let's preview a couple of questions that might come up. Main thing is just what is the topic? And then what is the central idea? Remember, we're going to separate those so that if you can answer both, then you're doing a little bit more specific work than just saying one or the other. And the second question, you're going to need to explain in a complete thought. Okay, the central idea, again, remember, just the message the author provides. So what details helped you infer the central idea? Sometimes there's a sentence that tells you that, but often you have to make this decision yourself based on all of the parts and pieces that the author has given you with all the evidence and how it came to this conclusion of all that must point toward this is the central idea. Okay, so then we're going to look really closely and see if we can find a sentence in this page that helps us really find the author's central idea. And a lot of times in a nonfiction text, there'll be one of those about every paragraph. We often call that a topic sentence when we're learning our own style of writing as young writers. Okay, so then when we're done with this lesson today, I'm going to have you going out looking for a book that's nonfiction or a news article. You can take a look at it, read it for a little while, and then stop and jot a prediction of what you would say the central idea is, and then go on and find a couple details that you would say support it. Okay, let's go back to this very first question, and I'm going to do my best in reading this in my best voice. Think about this question while I'm reading page 64 from Race, Real Estate, and Uneven Development, The Kansas City Experience from 1900 to 2010 by Kevin Fox Gotham. Yet this totally planned and privately built community was based on a racialized meaning of what meant a good community should and should not contain. In Kansas City, many J.C. Nichols Company advertisements began with the slogans such as "Escape" and "Live better for less" to appeal to consumer desires for fine community with every neighborhood convenience. Nichols also emphasized the importance of homogeneous neighborhoods as a superior atmosphere for social life and raising children. As he reported to a Time magazine journalist in 1947, "When you rear children in a good neighborhood, they will go out and fight communism." Nichols' use of racially restricted covenants and FHA subsidies served as an effective mechanism for creating and maintaining the racial segregation of his settlement spaces long after the 1940s. In Johnson County, Kansas, the J.C. Nichols Prairie Village subdivision became Kansas City's equivalent to New York's Levittown, as FHA-inspired mass production fueled the construction of cheap suburban housing. In 1960, the National Association of Home Builders awarded Prairie Village Best Complete Community in the United States. By this time, the community contained more than 50,000 residents, but only 2 black families. A number of long-term employees of the Nichols Company remembered how the real estate firm discriminated against Jews and blacks and became involved in suburban development. Okay. I'm going to read this other little passage here at the bottom of this page that's going to speak to the long-term employees and how they remember the real estate firm and the discrimination, like they said, against Jews and blacks. If we think back to some pretty powerful vocabulary that you heard in this passage, do you remember the word homogeneous neighborhoods? What does that mean? You might have even heard someone pronounce it homogeneous neighborhoods. Okay, do you have a guess on what that might mean? Those are neighborhoods where all of the people who live there are of the same background, right? And so you could see that was even one of the goals, it seemed, and one of the ways that J.C. Nichols learned to advertise how people could move to these communities under the idea that they would be keeping their real estate as best worth the most money it could be. And you can see why this is in a book called Race, Real Estate, and Uneven Development. And then you might even further discover why it's really compared in a common discussion about racism in Kansas City. Okay, so then this is the part that talks about long-term employees and how they remember it. You see, when I first went there to the Prairie Village urban subdivision, a Jewish person and a black person could not buy there. Mr. Nichols used to send salesmen out in the lot where white residents wanted to buy to see if there was any objective to a Jewish or black family moving in. We've always tried to promote the growth of the community along with us. If we could just influence and get everybody to think our way, well then that would be helpful for everyone. I'd like to think that most of the areas that we worked with really follow a pretty logical and fairly well-planned growth. We have never gone out and developed in a helter-skelter manner. We have always related back to our earlier subdivisions and our earlier projects and tried to keep our development that way. We try to influence the development of a whole community, not just the part we are specifically interested in. Okay, I find these parts to be very fascinating, and I would agree that there are some parts and pieces of Kansas City that as a younger person may not have realized were designed so intentionally. So let's look back and let's think about the message the author provides. What details helped you infer the central idea of this passage? What would you say the central idea of this passage was? And then again, just because we piqued your curiosity, what does this have to do with perhaps why we have renamed the fountain no longer after J.C. Nichols? Okay. Third question, is there a sentence that most closely states the central idea in this passage? Right? I think we could definitely discover that perhaps the one we talked about with the word homogeneous in there. So listen to this sentence and see if you think it best captures what this entire passage is about. What's neat to point out is it's really not the first of any of these sentences, but I had to kind of look for it and decide on my own, yep, that's the one that points to the most centralized meaning of what I'm reading. Nichols also emphasized the importance of homogeneous neighborhoods as a superior atmosphere for social life and raising children. Okay, so I think that advertisement and that draw to have the ability to cause some of the moving going on and the uneven development and to create these separations that exist in our city seems to be quite a lot of what that passage and that page is all surrounding and talking about. Okay, so I hope this has been some help to you in really deciding what a central idea is. We've talked about how it really appears mostly in a kind of text that we consider nonfiction, which is often based and written on true events instead of those that are made up. When you talk about those that are made up, you often use that other word, theme, to talk about the author's big idea. Let's ask you to go on, read on a little bit. Let me know what you find. I'm so curious to see if it would be on this topic, and I think that would be a great choice to read further, or another topic that you might find equally interesting. Stop and jot a prediction when you decide you found a central idea of a page or a passage that you think would be worth discussing home. Help at home, ask for the details that students might have come to this conclusion based on, because the more we can ask, well then how did you come to that conclusion? Then the more that they're going to come to this decision that that's the average way we always answer a question, and then they'll just rock it on these tests that we take in school. Also remember that if you're regularly discussing things you read and see on the news, often the news article coming through on radio or news broadcast has primarily a central idea. So you could do some of these reading and listening opportunities at home and practice strengthening your understanding of how central idea works. I hope this has been some help to you today. My name is Chris Odom. I am your secondary English coordinator for the Kansas City Public Schools, and it's been fun working with you on this ELA Tuesday. Have a wonderful day.